Hey guys, it's Christina here. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Christina. For those of you who are new to the space, I'm a naturopath, herbalist, life coach, and carnivore. And I'm over here sharing my journey with carnivore, as well as lots of different bits and pieces of information. And so today I want to talk about insulin resistance. And is insulin resistance the thing that's stopping you from being successful on whatever diet you choose? So in my clinical practice, I work with a multiple different range of dietary protocols, because ultimately I think it's your decision. You've got to choose what's going to work for you at your point in life, what your goals are, all of that type of stuff. Because at the end of the day, I'm not going to be there cooking your food. I'm not going to be there doing any of that stuff for you in the sense of cooking your food, meal planning, making sure you eat the right things. I'm not going to be there. That it's going to be something that you have to do the practical element for. I can actually help you with the theoretical element, the planning element, the thinking about what's going to work for you and what you need to actually implement, but you have to do the implementation phase of it. And you might join a support group. You know, I have a support group for carnivores in particular, to actually help with the actual let's talk it out and let's, get some support on the emotional level, physical level, all of the things. But again, at the end of the day, when you hang up that phone, you're by yourself and you have to figure out what you're doing and how you're doing it and what's going to work. And that for that reason, that's why I work with a number of different dietary protocols. While I think that carnivore is probably the closest to a proper human diet, keto/carnivore is probably it. Hypercarnivore is probably it. I do have clients that's not what they're able to do at this point in life. Like, they might have just gone through a divorce and they just are like trying to work out what single life looks like, what single parenting looks like what doing their business looks like with just them, and how to figure it all out. And so at that point in time, it might be really challenging for them to make a significant dietary change, whereas some baby steps might actually be a little bit more helpful for them at that point. And so we work with what the individual is able to do. But along the many years that I've worked in this sort of health space, and it's been about 20 years all up, one of the things that I've seen time and time again in my own health journey and in the health journey of those that I work with, that there often is this cycle of yo-yo dieting that a lot of women have. And it comes along with, you don't need your butt, Jazzy. And it often comes along with, like, trying a different diet and getting some success. So like, you might start Weight Watchers, for example, and you start to get some success and it's working really well for a period of time. You feel really good, and then it starts to get harder. And so what inevitably generally happens in these scenarios is that people drop their calories even more. They go, oh, it must be because I'm eating too much. So they do something that's going to drop their calories, and they might lose a little bit more, but there gets to be a point where you are really in a chronic calorie deficit for what you actually need to be consuming for your body from a hormonal perspective, nutrient perspective, all of those different things. And so that can be really, really challenging, because you're trying your hardest. You're trying to do all of the things that you feel are the right thing to do in order to be able to create the changes, but your body's just not complying anymore. And inevitably, this cycle that I see is that women give up and they go, well, why deprive myself of this food or these things that I want to be eating, or challenging myself when it comes to social situations, etc., and watching everybody else eat this food with no problems and no drama. Why bother if it's not actually going to do anything for me, if it's not actually going to help me? And one of the things that a lot of people miss is this insulin resistance game. And it's because some of our teaching has been a little bit back to front, in the sense of how things work when things are going well is not the same as how things work when they're not going well. So for example, the normal way that blood glucose works is you eat something, and then as you digest that, the carbohydrates will turn into glucose, and that will get spread through your bloodstream, and then your body will pick up on that. So your pancreas will go, oh, hang on, this is how much glucose is there. This is how much insulin we need to actually create in response to that. And so it will release the insulin, and then that will unlock the muscles. The glucose will go into those muscles, and it'll be available energy for the body to actually use. However, when things have been out of alignment for a really long time, it's like the body gets stuck. And so the body gets used to making a certain amount of insulin. It gets used to what its expectations actually are. And so it's almost like that insulin pedal has been stuck on, in the on position, like the car and the accelerator. And what our body tries to do is just pump out enough glucose so that we're not having an accident, so that we're not, going into a detrimental health state. And so, like a coma, for example. And so it will create and release glycogen in response to the amount of insulin that's actually in the blood. Now, for a lot of women, they don't realize that this insulin scenario has been the thing that's actually kept them stuck. So they've lowered their calories, they've lowered their carbohydrates, they maybe have gone keto, they've maybe gone low carb, high fat, they maybe have done carnivore or any of these things, and they're just like really missing the energy. Like they're just not getting the energy that majority of us get when we first start out on carnivore, where we're just like pinging off the walls because we've got so much energy. They're not getting that. And they're not getting that because their body hasn't been able to utilize and mobilize fat as a fuel source. Now, the way in a normal, healthy metabolic system it works is that there's no carbohydrates around, or there's low carbohydrates around, and so the body has to use fat as a fuel source. So it takes that fat, the mitochondria will turn it into ketones, and it gets released, and then, of course, ketones is the fuel source that we're actually using. In the case when insulin is stuck on, the body can't really do that because it can't make ketones while there's glucose present. And so while that glucose is present, because it's present in order to match the insulin levels, it can't make those ketones. And because it can't make those ketones, it can't use fat as a fuel source from our fat that's on our body. So it might make some ketones through the fat that's coming into our body through our diet, but it's not making any off of our body fat because it's locked away with insulin. And so this scenario is this situation where women get to where they've stopped losing weight, because the weight that they've lost so far is their subcutaneous weight. So it's the easy weight that's just underneath the skin. It's very easy to tap into. It's easy for the body to access. They've stopped using some of that weight, or they're using a less or a smaller percentage of that weight because they've gotten rid of quite a bit of it already. And they're not tapping into their subcutaneous weight or their subcutaneous fat, which is the fat that's around the organs. So we've got our skin layer, we've got fat, we've got muscle, and then there's another layer of fat. This is our visceral fat, and then we have our organs. And so that fat that is underneath the muscle layer is the one that is quite stubborn. And if it's been there for a really long period of time, which for most women it has been, it started around puberty, for them, they're not able to access this fat very easily because of this insulin resistance scenario. And because of that, the body has to make that glycogen in response to the insulin being there, and it's going to make that glycogen out of our muscles. And so we feel drained. We feel like we're lacking energy. We feel like we can't keep doing this because essentially what we're actually doing is utilizing our primary resource of muscle as a fuel source. And so from that perspective, women get to a place where they're like starving, because they literally are. And it's not because they're not feeding themselves, or actually maybe it is because they're feeding themselves a really strong calorie deficit. But beyond that, it's because their body is becoming catatonic, in the sense that it's breaking down its own muscle stores as food because it can't tap into that visceral fat. Now, I wish I knew this so much earlier, because it would have been so helpful to myself, but also to a lot of my patients. having learnt this information and really started to connect in with this information, it is a game changer. And I have seen people now in the last 6 to 12 months really shift weight, like really start to drop the weight that has been there for a really long time. It's kind of like haunted them for a really long time, and start to make a real significant difference in their life. Now, there are lots of little keys and strategies to do that. Previously, it was known as fasting. People would do like water fasts in order to be able to do that. Now, one of the things that I've been sharing with people is that if you are in this situation with insulin resistance, those water fasts will be helpful in the early stages. When you're moving subcutaneous fat, they're definitely going to be helpful there. They'll help you tap into that fat, but they're not going to help you tap into that visceral fat that has a hormonal profile of its own. They're not going to help you tap into that. And you have to do what is known as an eating fast to actually help you through that, where your body is getting food, but it is from specific foods. And this is where the sardine fast can be really helpful. It's where doing a fat fast can be really helpful. It's where doing a butter fast can be really helpful. It's where utilizing, depending on what dietary protocol you're on, utilizing some different fats and oils to actually help you do that. So MCT, for example, is one of the fats that you could use if you were, say, ketovore or keto. I'm not a super fan of MCT oil because it's fractionated coconut oil, and I do kind of have like just this internal belief that if it's not something I could make at home, then it's probably something I shouldn't actually be eating, and I would need a factory to actually be able to make MCT oil at home. So I'm kind of not a super fan, but maybe for this purpose, I would see that it could be very useful for somebody who is happy to use that. Otherwise, sardines, baby. But also mackerel, and mixing it up with a little bit of something else. Like, you know, mixing it with some salmon, mixing it with some tuna or some whitefish can be another way of just starting to get yourself acclimatized to things like sardines without the, you know, over-powerful sort of experience that many of us have when we hear the word sardines. And so, you know, there are several things that we can do. We could try the fat fasting, we could try sardine fasting, we could try butter fasting, we could try you know, using some MCT oil if we're ketovore or keto. We could try a couple of different types of eating fasts, and I'm investigating some more to help us do that, because these short chain and medium chain fatty acids that are in these foods can help us unlock the mitochondria, because the way out of it is ketones. So you may even think about using some type of endogenous ketones. I personally have not tried any, so I'm not going to recommend any, but I know that that's another sort of space that maybe at one point in time I'll investigate and I'll try it out for myself, and then I might have something to recommend. I don't have something to recommend at this point in time. But the way out is actually by producing ketones, because ketones lower insulin, helps to take that pedal or take that foot off of the pedal when it comes to helping the body start to be able to reduce this cycle of glucose insulin resistance and allow us to actually start to consume our own body fat, that visceral fat that we're really trying to tap into and activate, and make our own ketones after that. And so this is just a little window that I want people to start to get their heads around, that, you know, if you're on a stall, if you're struggling, take your measurements, know your numbers. It's one of the things that I have been banging into my own clients quite a bit, is know your numbers. You know, come to me, tell me what's your blood glucose, what's your ketones, so that I can see, are we getting into ketosis? Is our glucose too high to be able to get into ketosis? If that's the case, what's our insulin like? What's our, you know, GKI? What is the range or the index of our glucose ketones? And how is that playing out, so that we can see, do we need to start to implement some specific types of fasting to allow you to actually tap into some of these fuel sources and start to activate and deactivate things like insulin resistance? So I just wanted to pop this in here so that if you're starting to get into that place of like, why is the diet not working? It's worked for me forever and a day. And I see this over not just the spaces of low carb, high fat and ketovore and all of that type of stuff and carnivore. I see this in other spaces too, where people are doing low calorie diets and restrictive calorie diets, that they hit a place where they plateau, but then they also really struggle to move past that. And it's often because of insulin resistance, and nobody's really talking about it to them. And so they don't know how to move forward, and they just give up, and then they go into this mental cycle of, I suck, this is crap, look at me, I'm terrible, everybody else can do it, there must be something wrong with me, that I can't have this, that I can't do it, all of that type of stuff. And it's just not the truth. If we spend some time starting to unlock and think about what are the drivers and what are the activating forces here, we can actually start to think about it in a slightly different way that might actually give us different results. So if you are interested in connecting with me, feel free to. You can find me at hello@christinamatthewson.com. Pop a comment below, like and subscribe to the video. I'm going to be talking about this even more. And you know, if you really want to know about it in a much greater detail, I've just done a webinar called The Blood Work of Weight Loss. It's available for you to purchase. You can jump on that anytime you like. I'll pop the link below when I get down to doing the notes. All right, bye for now. I hope you have the most amazing day ever. And remember, it's not necessarily about you. It's your body telling you there's something going on. Let's figure it out. Let's figure out what the thing is that's going on so that we can get you the results that you actually are after. All right, bye for now. Have an amazing day. I'll talk to you again soon. See ya.